What's going on, guys? It's Frito here for your Overwatch. It's been a minute since we've uploaded. That's because we've been in the lab working on this video. I've got what seems to be a very different take on the Roadhog rework, and I want to get enough game time to get examples of what I wanted to talk about. I think the changes are a lot more complex than people realize, and learning what they do and how you need to adapt your gameplay from the old version to now, I think is going to take you a lot farther than you think. First of all, though, they did buff his survivability with Take a Breather in a hotfix that came through last night. The key takeaways here is that the total damage reduction while casting it went up to 40%. It was 50 in the old version, but overall a big net buff, as the big change on Take a Breather now is that when you are stunned, you still keep it because it's on a resource. It's not a cooldown that gets fully interrupted when it's canceled. The buffs from last night sent the total healing to 500 with the full cast, and the heal per second on it went up because you only need 2.5 seconds in order to fully channel that. Fully recharging the ability only takes 10 seconds now, so his brawling is significantly increased. Of course, none of this applies if you get anti-nated, which is going to be the biggest thing that makes your life miserable. But we'll talk about how to outplay that as well. First and foremost, let's talk about some of the basics of the rework and how you'll want to adapt your gameplay. One common misconception that I hear is people think that the alternate fire was straight up removed. It was better to say that his ranged fire was just now included into his primary fire. So while Take a Breather now is hooked onto your alt fire, your primary fire is more of a 2-in-1, where it shoots the ranged attack projectile at the center of the spread, and then the rest of the shotgun spread kind of haphazardly spreads out beyond that. They reworked some of the numbers on this. It's less pellets technically, but more damage. I believe the projectiles are bigger as well. Overall, the weapon is just more consistent. The one major thing you do lose is the personality of that old alt fire that used to spread out, and there was a magical, like I believe it was 10 meters or so range where you could land it all as a headshot to one-shot kill something at medium range. I feel like that was kind of a specialist thing that really only happened either on accident, or if you're an absolute Roadhog legend, mastering that range and that hero, that aspect has been taken away, but what has buffed instead is just overall consistent normal damage, which I think applies more for most players, especially players that are flexing onto this hero as opposed to being an absolute master at him. But I would still rate it as an overall buff to his scrap gun, so much so that I feel the consistency with his pressure damage, even at medium range, is so much more effective now that I feel less pressure to have to land a hook to land any damage. This is a quite key distinction for me, because I think most players are confusing the value of Roadhog to only be about his hook, but this new Roadhog, you actually do a lot. Turreting up, holding your position, and punishing aggression, even with your hook waiting. But we'll expand more on that. Continuing on the rework now, his new ability Pigpen, when activated, will do 60 burst damage, then 30 per second for the rest of its duration, and I think not knowing that number makes people underrate this ability. That's 150 damage just with this ability alone in an AoE, hitting anything. And because you can set it down pre-fight, hook something into it, or maybe even just trap them as they dive your teammate, you'll have the cooldown ready to often get a second, or if the fight really extends, third and fourth, as you'll see in the footage of today's video, Pigpen to drop down, and that's really going to rack up the damage you're doing overall. Not to mention, on top of that, the slow effect can actually work in reverse. People talk about hooking something into the Pigpen, but as those brawls come through, that target is more consistently going to die with a chain of CCs once Pigpen lands on them, either from your teammates or guaranteeing your next hook, which is on a 6-second cooldown, by the way. But I think the biggest aspect I think people are missing about the new ability is that it has a 1-second arm time, which means if you're throwing it in the mix of the fight, there's a lot of characters that cannot even do 100 damage in a second so easily. So throwing it down at their feet or right behind them, so they're going to struggle to find where it is on the floor in time, they're very likely to get hit by it. So by using Pigpen aggressively, almost like it's a second hook, I'm going to say it's like half as effective as a hook, but with both of them, you have two versions of CC to throw at an enemy. So situationally, you can kind of choose which one's going to be more necessary for that given engagement. This means I felt like I could save my hook for the primary target I need it for and use my more consistent scrap gun damage and Pigpen to handle other things. Or, you know, combo them together, whatever. A lot of flexibility now that you have both versions of crowd control. We might say that this is crowd control creep, but hey, we got to give COG something. So that's the majority of the rework. Weapon more consistent, but maybe losing a bit of the meat medium range burst potential, but overall better. New ability, which is about half of the value of a new hook, but still, it's an extra button you didn't have before. And take a breather, now, especially with the new improvements from yesterday, I think is very clearly a net buff, especially when you start to apply all these things to the ways that I'm going to prescribe you try to apply this character. He really has his own playstyle, which is unlike any other tank, and I think is going to have some very good matchups and important ones for the average player. Even if the top 500s are going to say he's useless, he's very applicable for a lot of situations that no other tank will solve. So I think it's important that we understand that and have a deeper knowledge of the game rather than just assuming there's going to be an Ana in every game hard shutting you down. The reality is, guys, a fun fact about Ana, she's one of the more popular supports, but she also has one of the worst win rates of any support, at least historically. I haven't checked the data recently, but normally Ana's win rates don't get into the positive until Masters rank. So very likely, something like 97% of you are more likely to lose with an Ana on your team. Maybe it goes up if you're against the Roadhog, but in general, the skill required to play and time Ana appropriately, I think if you know how to outplay Ana with strong positioning to make sure that you're not exploited when you are antied, well, then you really can have no weakness, because the other characters that he is very strong against are the ones that don't have disables. So let me show you an example of what I mean. In this Gibraltar game, I'm going up against a Lifeweaver Mercy combination, which shouldn't be a good support line. However, it's one that I see kind of often, and I think the reason is those two characters are very reliable supports that give a direct route to power to a player that masters their kit without needing to hit shots. They seem fairly popular to me, and as a lot of tank characters, it can be very difficult to ever get on them because they play so far away, their single target healing is so good that as long as their targeting is on point, it can be very difficult for your team to focus fire a feeding enemy in front of you. Winston himself does not have the damage to out-damage a thing that Lifeweaver's healing, and that's just one of the supports. Not to mention, he has a lot of health, dodges away, and heals when he does so. So unless you've got like elite tier primal mechanics, I often feel that I simply cannot kill a Lifeweaver unless he makes 2 mistakes in a row. And in order to kill anything, you have to focus fire with your team, which then, as either the damage dealer or tank, if either of you makes a focus fire mistake, positioning mistake, all of a sudden the healing wins. Now on this attack, we eventually get it together, punish some space, get going, get some attack, but it takes so long as the healing stats are so incredible, and when you don't have a good way to destroy Lifeweaver's tree, that slows down the game as well. Valkyrie slows down the game. She gets away, survives forever. So if you don't land your combos, don't execute Nano Blade, etc., as a tank, it can feel hard to really have a big impact, unless you go a character like Roadhog. And it's this reason why I think Roadhog is going to be an incredible ranked pub stomper character, which is all he needs to be. Now, I don't care if he's getting played in pro matches or top 500 or anything like that. I think what we need to remember about this game is that despite there being a bevy of counters in the roster, as the hero roster expands, the player base's ability to play lots of characters doesn't necessarily go up. Just because new characters come out doesn't mean we all play them at the same time. Even someone like me, who plays a lot of characters, I'm really starting to feel that my skill set is getting thinned out, and my mastery and expertise in the characters I used to be good at starts to wane over time. This is actually good for the game, in my opinion, because although you can say certain characters have harsher counters, you're not going to face them realistically all the time. And that means if you're up against very popular support characters, Mercy, Weaver, Bap, Lucio, even Kiriko, ones that have mobility, escapes, or high healing numbers, Hog's good against all that because he has crowd control for the mobility and high damage for the healing. I want to talk more in depth about maps that you should consider him on, but the shortcut answer is the fact that he is terrible at retaking space because he has no defensive tools, obviously. So he's best at protecting backliner characters who are on an established position against divers. So this Route 66 game, I really felt like I could enact my will, because we're going to place a pig pen up on top, the key power position, where the enemy likes to dive, or really just babysit my Ana with it for the rest of the game. Because, 2 reasons, she's going to be a key dive target for the enemy, but also she's my key teammate. The synergy between Hog and Ana has actually gone up. Well, yeah, she counters him as well on the enemy team, but remember, a major thing that you lost with your Take a Breather is that you no longer get the healing amp effect after casting it, but you have far more healing for yourself than before. So when you get heal nated, it's really, really ridiculous. Then on top of that, getting nanoed at any point buffs all your damage. And there's not really any tank in the game that's as effective at medium and close range as Hog is. Maga, when he comes out, Junker Queen comes close, but an entirely different playstyle. The thing Hog does that those others don't is he's more effective at just holding his ground for longer and has the best burst damage out of all of them. And another character that I think is just incredibly popular in my games anyway is Doomfist. I see Doomfist all the time. It's probably just an indication of the rank I play at, which is Masters to low GM. I think as you get super high in the ranks, the support players outplay Doomfist. But I swear this guy's like in half of my games because he as well is another one of those ranked pub stomper heroes where if you play your own cooldowns, he's like the one tank that has the potential to carry the game. And for some reason, players seem higher on Doomfist, at least they pick him often enough to make that seem to be the case, who also gets shut down by Ana. I mean, anything without a shield, and even tanks with shields, get shut down by Ana if she lands them. That's just what the character does. All tanks get screwed in Overwatch 2. Like, you're not getting past that. You gotta outplay it at some point. There is no tank that you pick that exists and is going to carry the game. You could say Orisa, but she really just doesn't lose the game. She doesn't really win the game. Hog can win the game. Okay, next, let's talk about some positioning, which will then bleed into talking about which maps he'll be any good on. I think part of the reason why that this rework works for me because I have been a Junkrat player for so long. And Junkrat as well is a gimmicky style of hero that has to get in his good positions. We've made so many videos, especially even in Overwatch 2, one of the first to say Junk was a good hero when no one believed in him. Now, lots of players, even in top 500, are masters at Junk when he was believed to be a useless hero. Now, it's harsher when your tank is a gimmicky hero, of course, but if you apply the same logic of where you want to position on the map, you're going to go pretty far, and that is trying to play around your trap, which is more effective when you're in a room. Because if there's a doorway or some passageway that the enemy has to go through, having the trap preset in the fight in those positions at least zones out that area of the map and allows you to be more effective if they do fight there or focus more of your attention down a different lane. Especially when you think of the turret meta in general, as there's more of these CC type things on the battlefield, you're starting to play Rainbow Six Siege with how you're denying the map. So whereas I saw Jake on Twitter say Hog will always be a bad hero because he doesn't contest the objective very well, I can see how that's the case at the highest tiers of gameplay, but for most players, I think enemy defenses don't know how to react to a Roadhog who's progressively taking map, perhaps even using the cart as cover to get into his positions. So I would say some payload and hybrid maps, as long as they have the rooms that I'm describing, can be playable. Keeping in mind that the take a breather change allows you to be more sustainable in these types of hidey hole positions. You can play offset from your team, and the solo lurking playstyle is emphasized with Roadhog now. But that's just to alleviate his weakest playstyle. He's still not good as an attacking hero because going in and getting space is difficult for him. I'm gonna say his worst map is going to be flashpoint maps. I'm going to be getting it to work here just because I'm counter-comping the enemy and they're playing aggressive, trying to work as a team, but with my Ana's support and Pigpen in order to punish them in a variety of positions, the aggressive Pigpen onto the point is just chef's kiss in my opinion. I'm going to say his worst maps are Flashpoint for a simple reason. It's the type of game mode where there's a lot of forced retaking. It's going to be a pretty harsh 50-50 on whether you are spawning closer to the next objective or not, and if you have to retake into space, it is a nightmare. Especially New Junk City has a lot of punishing chokes. The way you outplay this though is by splitting up the map, sort of like a Crossfire character would. It's really only working here because the enemy is playing overly aggressive, which Hog loves, and I'm positioning out of line of sight of the enemy Ana, so even when she does nade me, it's an easy Suzu from my teammate. And if you outplay that, Hog's stats are just simply better than a lot of the tanks, with way more damage sustain and crowd control. Do we forget that Hog was like super meta for a minute when we were in that sniper meta? Yo, look out if you start getting Kurikos that are pocketing a Hog. I'm telling you, you outplay that one cooldown either by baiting it to get on you too early. If you're at full health and just walk it off, then heal afterwards. That's not good. What you want to do on a players is wait until the Hog is a bit low so he actually can be finished, or if he's entirely out of position, because if he's in cover, you throw the ante, he's still got lots of health to work with and a shotgun that's more than happy to invite you into close range to rush him down. All right, last few sections here. Let's talk about countering Roadhog now and then give concluding thoughts on the entire kit as well as their rework philosophy and the balanced state of the game. This Shambali, the enemy is running that dreaded support backline, which Hog is normally good into, but I'm going to go to Zarya here, and my player models aren't loading in correctly here. It's kind of crazy. It feels like I'm playing Quake again in 2001. But the reason why I would suggest Zarya as one of the better counter picks against Hog, because especially on defense, remember, your job is just really to survive. So you don't have to go aggressive at any point. You don't have to over leverage yourself. You can kind of just hold a safe position. Look for your team to get hooked and then save them with a bubble, and then all of the enemy's offense is going to vanish. Well, at least from the tank itself. Taking the Hog mirror prior to that kind of guarantees that there'll be some kill trading, whereas on defense, you want to survive as long as possible to drain out the clock. Zarya bubbles are more effective against ultimates. Holding them properly can save you from a lot of that big burst of offense that can come through, and there's not much in the game that does that as a tank, to be honest. Shields block line of sight, but for hard commit abilities, particularly Nanoblade or Sombra's Disables, crowd controls, and melees, the bubbles are going to be best. And the biggest Ana tip for you folks trying to use Ana to counter Roadhog, try to remember just how long that Ana nade cooldown is. It's all your offense, but it's also most of your defense, at least your self-heal. So you're going to be very vulnerable after you use nade, so you want to read if your team's focus fire is enough to do the remaining amount of Hog's health down when you throw that nade. Because if Hog shakes it off, his take a breather will get him back to full for a long duration after that fight, and you'll never kill him. An aspect I think players have forgotten about that Ana matchup is that sleep used to interrupt take a breather and remove the ability. While yes, it'll stun him out of using it currently, he'll have it again afterwards. So in that aspect, Hog was actually buffed against that ability. And remember, sleep got nerfed a while ago against all tank characters, only lasting a portion of its duration. So it's not so threatening to you, all things considered. It's just nade. Okay, overall review of how they've gone about the mechanics of this character, their rework philosophy in general, and just adding more turret creep to the game, because another deployable trap is another thing we have to shoot at to clear out. But I think on a tank character, I'm fine with it. Thankfully, because there's only one tank in the game, they can all have crowd control, and we'll only really be dealing with one at a time anyway. Crowd control on a character that doesn't have a shield feels more fair to me than, let's say, a character like Sigma, which you might just evaluate as a better version of Roadhog potentially, since he shields himself and his team. And due to the way they've kind of reworked everything, those two characters kind of just don't kill each other. That's what I've noticed. Like, it's deemed that Sig is a counter to Hog, and since breather isn't canceled by a stun, they both kind of just neutral out, I find. And honestly, if I think would I rather be playing from a fun factor point of view against a Sig or a Hog, I think a Hog's more fun to interact with, because a lot of the squishies just find it so annoying to have to deal with a shield. I've seen a lot of criticisms about the Hog rework, like, what are you even thinking, Blizzard Forehead? I'm a little confused what people even want them to be doing. Like, did you think they were going to make him into Orisa? I actually thought their explanations on a Q&A they did with Boger and Six were actually quite good. They talked about trying other abilities, like making the take a breather an AoE for his team, for example. They could have made him more of a teammate, but their rationale was that the healing was already strong in the game and they just didn't want another healing creep addition. So instead we got, I guess, turret creep, deployable creep. And I think they went the right direction, in my opinion. Maybe as annoying as turrets are, you at least get to shoot them. There's like positioning to it, as opposed to just vague stats for the whole team. I think I definitely prefer skill shots and deployables as opposed to aura effects. Just like in general, if I had to pick which aspect was stronger. A cute thing no one said is that there's kind of like a lore connection now to Roadhog and Junkrat's playstyle. I don't know if that was intended at all, but they both have traps now. So from like a character personality point of view, I think it suits them. And since I can describe and show you matchups that Roadhog doesn't just thrive in, I think is like the best tank. If the enemy picks certain heroes or certain kind of comp, Hog is like dominant against them. And I think as the game evolves, continues to grow, they might even be adding heroes more frequently. They teased at that. And with Overwatch being a dedicated PvP hardcore game, you know, they used to be more precious about it with Overwatch 1. There may have been a fear that for a more casual audience, adding characters too quickly would be like overburdening them. But I bet they're going to ramp up hero production next year, if they can. The way I sense is that's the aim. And the only reason they wouldn't do it is based on their production pipeline. So with that being the case, like, we need to be ready for heroes to have a certain subset of niche matchups they are and aren't good in, and that's going to be the nature of this game. And I'm just a little bit surprised because I feel the Sombra rework got really good reception as being fair, both punishing and rewarding at the same time. She also has really sharp matchups. She also falls off a cliff when you don't land her plays or she gets outplayed. I think Hog feels the same. The only difference is the tank category is one that players have different expectations of, like they want their tank to be reliable. But I gotta tell you this, there is no reliable tank in the tank category. What are we talking about? They're all miserable in their own way in the wrong circumstances. Tank is just a rough role in Overwatch. So to have a character that I feel controls the game and punishes over-aggression onto me and my team, or the very forgiving support characters that exist, I don't know, I'm pretty happy with the way it panned out. And I think when players learn how to support him properly, you get like an Ana Kiriko on your team, which isn't a support line I see too often nowadays, like just in general, even before this rework. Those two can really make Hog a menace. Good luck killing him then. You cleanse the anti and nano him in the ult fight, good luck. Just from what I've noticed is like, for whatever reason, Kiriko players have use Suzu on their tanks less and less over time. I think there's reasons for that, and mostly because like the sustain from other supports is higher. So often you need the Suzu to either just to heal or bail out something that's losing a attrition exchange. But if players kind of change that a bit, your DPS hang back a little more pressure on the Hog. I think we're not too far away from that Giga Hog meta. The difference is I think players were used to playing more defensively from the squishy position and allowing the Hog to be the focus. The difference is tanks have been weak for so long that squishy players are trying to do more, when in that patch we were used to just hiding from Widow all the game anyway. But you could still play like that, and I think Hog is going to do work for you. Let me know what you guys think in the comment section down below. If you enjoyed this video, please be sure to leave it a like, and don't forget to hit subscribe and click the bell icon to actually get notified when our videos come out. That's been it for me. I've been Frito for your Overwatch. I'll see you guys next time.